1-800-722-7337. 1-800-722-7337. Call now.
You're watching Channel 5.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with Ross Perot. He may not be the classic politician, but he certainly knows how to play the game. Mr. Perot, who advertises himself as being an outsider, has managed to steal the day after the primary season from President Bush and Governor Clinton by hiring two of Washington's leading insiders to run his campaign for the presidency. Ed Rollins is a Republican, Hamilton Jordan a Democrat. What they have in common is a knowledge of how to push all the right political buttons. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
Any doubt that Perot plans a serious campaign was put to rest when Hamilton Jordan and Ed Rollins presented themselves to the press today in Dallas. They may be an odd political couple, but their credentials are impressive. Rollins ran Ronald Reagan's re-election sweep 8 years ago. Jordan was the principal architect of Jimmy Carter's rise from obscurity to the White House in 1976. Both said today they're now fully committed to Perot's presidential pursuit.
I think the possibilities of a Perot presidency are more exciting and promising to me personally than the certainty of what either a Bush or Clinton presidency would mean for this country.
I think the vulnerability the president has, the American public today is looking to the future, not the past. And I think that obviously when you've been around for as long as he has and many of his advisors, it's awful hard to be the change agent.
The president had no comment, but Clinton told an audience of broadcast executives in Los Angeles that buying good political help, as he put it, proves that Perot is not the amateur outsider he claims to be.
Ross Perot has been a very effective professional political operative over the last 20 years. That is not the image he's trying to give off, and I think that this will at least confirm that.
While Jordan and Rollins come from different political stock, like Perot, they are less interested in ideology than in results. ABC's political director Hal Bruno thinks Perot has helped his campaign immensely.
They may come from different parties, but the one thing that they have in common is that they both know how to win.
For weeks now, the president and Governor Clinton have tried to ignore Mr. Perot's rising popularity, to treat it as a passing fancy based on symbols. But now, with two respected and recognized pros running his campaign, their campaigns have good reason to be frightened. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Los Angeles.
There was big news about women and for women in yesterday's elections. In California alone, 18 women were chosen to run in the state's 52 congressional districts, and two very high-profile women in California are looking to become senators. Here's ABC's Cokie Roberts.
If American political trends start in California, that's good news for female candidates. Democrats nominated Congresswoman Barbara Boxer and former San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein to run for California's 2 Senate seats. It's a year when women are shouting the message voters want to hear.
The status quo must go.
Women play well with voters looking for change. In California yesterday, 90% told exit pollsters they were dissatisfied with or angry at the federal government. Most of those voters went for Boxer and Feinstein. Earlier this year, that anger vote also propelled women into surprise Senate nominations in Illinois and Pennsylvania. And the all-male image of the Senate projected in the Clarence Thomas hearings seems to have encouraged women to vote.
I think that the Thomas hearings, to some extent, did help galvanize women and galvanize them to support other women candidates.
So far, 51 women have won their party's nomination for the House of Representatives. Though women in both parties are doing well so far, Democrats might expect to benefit from something else, voters tell the exit pollsters. Most Republicans disagree with their own party's anti-abortion stance.
It's definitely a potential problem, and it poses a problem for the Bush campaign.
Issues like abortion might play a role this year, but the main thing women candidates have going for them is the voters' readiness to throw the bums out. And many say bums is a masculine noun. Cokie Roberts, ABC News, Washington.
These are some of the other election results. In the shockwave of the Rodney King beating in Los Angeles, there was a proposal to overhaul the Los Angeles Police Department, and it was approved overwhelmingly. One key provision will limit the term of the police chief. Also in Los Angeles, another act of violence had political repercussions. There was a big effort to unseat a judge, Joyce Carlin, who'd given a Korean grocer probation for killing a black teenager. Judge Carlin won her election and will keep her seat. One constant yesterday, voters by the millions stayed home. Later we'll see why. On the American agenda tonight, the rich nations versus the poor. Who's going to pay to save the world? And the AIDS epidemic is out of control all over the world.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Mylanta and Anacin.
I was really downing those tablets. Come on, they're not candy. I started to think there was something really wrong with my stomach. Was I relieved when my doctor told me to try a new antacid tablet.
Introducing Mylanta tablets, shown to neutralize more stomach acid than the leading tablet.
Unbelievable.
New Mylanta tablets.
My doctor said Mylanta.
Her name is Sarah, and she's lucky, because today she'll encounter egrets doing dances and alligators in the wild. She'll see how other moms take care of their kids, and she'll be doing this, recycling, through a program of the National Park Service and its recycling partner, Dow.
We can make a difference in what tomorrow brings.
Together with the National Park Service and folks like Sarah.
Dow lets you do great things.
There is a new forecast today on the spread of AIDS, much more pessimistic than any of the projections we have seen before. Researchers at the International AIDS Center at Harvard University warn that the spread of AIDS will be, in their words, explosive, disastrous, and quite probably unstoppable. Here's ABC's George Strait.
As bad as the AIDS epidemic has been for the last 10 years, the new study says the next 10 years will be worse.
The AIDS epidemic is heading out of control. The world's vulnerability to the further spread of AIDS is actually increasing, not decreasing.
The Harvard group says previous studies by the World Health Organization were too conservative, and that by the year 2000, the number of people worldwide infected with the AIDS virus could be 110 million, 2 million in the United States. That's twice as many as earlier estimates. And as the epidemic grows, the amount being spent to control it is going down. The World Health Organization spent 40% less on prevention last year, and individual governments are spending less too.
In North America, an average of $2.70 per person was spent last year for prevention activities. In Europe, about $1.20. In sub-Saharan Africa, 7 cents per person.
Dr. Mann says the figures show a lack of commitment to control the epidemic, especially in the U.S.
Our national AIDS efforts in this country are not up to the task. Unfortunately, I wish we could say America is a model, but we can't.
And efforts to control the epidemic are falling further behind because the virus is spreading to countries in the third world that are not prepared for it. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.
Still overseas, an anniversary. In China, it was 3 years ago this evening that Chinese soldiers massacred hundreds of pro-democracy demonstrators at Tiananmen Square. Today, one Chinese citizen was brave enough to enter the square in an effort to make a symbolic protest. A short while ago, we talked to our own Todd Carroll, who was there as well.
Well, the square was pretty quiet until we got there. We ended up in the middle of an incident. A man came out and began to unfurl a banner, and we ran to take pictures of him. And plainclothes policemen from all over the square descended on us and the man and began beating us and grabbing him. And later they brought us across the square and led us into a Jeep where they beat us again and later detained us. Japanese cameraman was badly hit on the face, and there were bloodstains on his shirt, and he was led out again to a Jeep by police.
And did the authorities have any hesitation about beating up on you as well as on the lone demonstrator?
Absolutely not, but these authorities were plainclothesmen. We were later beat by people in uniform, but they're all the same, part of the big security apparatus in a police state.
To further confirm that, the human rights group Asia Watch reports that many more pro-democracy activists were arrested 3 years ago than Chinese officials admitted. Hundreds of them, according to Asia Watch, are still being held, as are many others who have tried to change the system over the years. Others have been released because Chinese officials find it in their best interest. Once again, a report filed by Todd Carroll.
For Liu Qing and his wife, these are happy days. He is the recipient of a rare gift from China's rulers, a passport. Next month, he hopes to be at Columbia University in New York. It will mark a long passage for Liu, who spent more than 10 years inside Chinese prisons for advocating democracy in the late 70s. Even after suffering the torture and isolation that are routine for political prisoners, Liu has not changed his beliefs.
Everyone has a right to express his political views. That is the most basic of human rights. Without it, there are no human rights.
If he makes it to America, he will join democracy advocates who emerged in the movements of the late 80s, like the astrophysicist Fang Lizhi and the young student leaders of Tiananmen, like Wu Erkai-shi.
While the Bush administration takes credit for the slow trickle of dissidents to the West, China's dictators may also achieve their own objectives by letting them go.
They realize that by getting rid of some of these people, they not only take pressure off in terms of international criticism, but they also relieve themselves of the burden of having internal critics making trouble within the country itself.
Even this policy is not consistent. Some dissidents who have been promised passports, like the defiant labor activist Han Dongfang, continue to get rough treatment. He is acutely ill with tuberculosis, which he contracted in prison. Yet, just after American officials were assured he would be allowed to leave the country, he was beaten up by Chinese police during a dispute inside a courthouse. First kicked in the chest, then shocked on the neck with an electric baton. Han's wife has become distraught over his treatment. If Han is ever issued a passport and permitted to go to America for medical care, he vows to come back and fight for independent labor unions. So far, this critic of China's communist regime has only managed to get as far as a local hospital. Todd Carroll, ABC News, Beijing.
An American who defected to the Soviet Union 30 years ago has turned up in a Russian psychiatric prison. Victor Hamilton apparently has been there for many years, suffering from some form of mental illness. His doctors knew him only as Mr. K. His wife, who still lives in the U.S., says she had no idea he was alive and hopes he'll come home. In a moment, what next now that Denmark has told the rest of Europe to forget it?
Imagine a pillowy cushion of softness with every step you take. Dr. Scholl's 2-layer air pillow insoles. 1 layer for shock, 1 for comfort. Dr. Scholl's. You'll feel better when the doctor is in.
This is regular. This is better. This Bayer is regular. For headaches, Anacin is better. Why better? Regular Bayer has 1 ingredient. Anacin has 2. A pain medicine plus a second ingredient that makes it work better. Get Anacin. Get better.
Morning breath.
As soon as I have my coffee, it's all gone.
Whether you admit it or not, it's a problem.
Okay, I have morning breath, but it doesn't bother anyone.
Don't be so sure. Mine's not so bad. Morning breath's not as bad as you think. It's worse. So get Scope. Its 2 powerful ingredients kill 90% of the bacteria that cause morning breath.
Was my morning breath really that bad?
There's no denying morning breath, so save your breath with Scope.
Polyshades by Minwax. It's a stroke of genius. Polyshades is rich stain and polyurethane protection in one. Polyshades gives wood a beautiful protective finish in half the time. Polyshades by Minwax.
If your doctor has recommended Metamucil and you like the results, but you don't like those glasses of thick liquid, change to FiberCon. Get the same fiber action in easy-to-swallow tablets. Get doctor-recommended FiberCon.
From the way most of Western Europe reacted to Denmark today, you'd have thought the Danes had declared war on the continent. Actually, they declared themselves out. Danish voters, by a narrow margin, rejected the new European Community Treaty designed to make a European Union, and left the rest of Europe, not to mention their own government, scrambling to figure out what happens next. Here's ABC's Jim Bitterman.
The 50,000 Danish voters who made the difference between acceptance and rejection of the treaty have given headaches to politicians across the continent. Today in Britain, parliamentarians who opposed the agreement were demanding that British voters should have a referendum on it, just as the Danes did. And in France, the government announced it will schedule a public referendum on the treaty. Those who voted against the treaty in Denmark believe the pro-Europe politicians were moving too fast. and disregarding the voting public's fears about losing their national identities. And they believe that given the chance, other Europeans too will vote against closer ties with their neighbors.
There are already so many problems in the cooperation today that it would be good just to stop here.
European foreign ministers will meet in an emergency session tomorrow, fearful that the disaster in Denmark could cause major problems for the future of the European community if they don't find a way to contain it. European leaders may try to go ahead without Denmark, or try to accommodate Danish concerns, or even try to renegotiate the treaty. But the real question is not limiting the problem to Denmark, but whether the Danish vote is a signal that the tide has begun to go out on European unity. Jim Bitterman, ABC News, Copenhagen.
Back home again, economic news today. There's some strength in the manufacturing sector. Orders to U.S. factories rose 1% in April. It's the fourth consecutive gain and the first time that has taken place in 4 years. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials gained more than 10 points to close at 3406, and the trading was heavy. Some news about television. The Senate voted overwhelmingly today to keep television programs that might be considered indecent off the air until after midnight. The ban does not apply to cable, only to stations, both public or commercial, that broadcast over the airwaves. The Federal Communications Commission already bars programs which are sexually explicit from airing before 8 p.m. The founder of Mad magazine, William Gaines, has died. Mr. Gaines created Mad as a comic book in 1952. 3 years later, he turned it into the very funny magazine it remains today. He was 70 years old. And Robert Morley has died. The British actor who was at his best playing jovial or pompous characters in dozens of movies, from those magnificent men in their flying machines to the African Queen, said once, "Anyone who works is a fool. I don't work, I merely inflict myself on the public." Mr. Morley was 84. We'll be back in a moment.
Nice try, Jenny. What's wrong? Oh, you have arthritis? Me too. It's hard to grip your racket, isn't it? Here, my doctor told me about this, Motrin IB. It's the same medicine as in prescription Motrin in non-prescription strength. It's great for minor arthritis pain. And one Motrin IB works as well as 2 regular aspirin. Try it. You'll have the advantage next set.
Motrin IB, the relief of Motrin in non-prescription strength.
We built this business.
He was wearing those night vision goggles they make. Otherwise, he never could have seen me. Rescued me.
Built this business.
They taught me computer drafting. I earned a degree. Now I've got a job.
They make the parts that connect my pacemaker. Never thought I'd be around to tell you that.
We built this business to build your dreams.
Most people think paint is paint. It's paint. But then again, most people aren't professional painters. There's only one paint this good, and there's only one place you can get it. The pros know. Ask Sherwin-Williams.
Fixodent Fresh. The spring water fresh feeling is reason enough to try it. And it's the strongest holding adhesive, so you'll never settle for anything less. Crisp freshness. Strongest hold. 2 great reasons to Fixodent and forget it.
Take a 3, 4, or 7-day fun ship vacation to the Bahamas, Caribbean, or Mexican Riviera on Carnival, the most popular cruise line in the world.
In the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro today, the biggest summit meeting ever has finally begun. For 2 years now, representatives of 170 nations have been preparing for the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development, the Earth Summit, as it's called. They have a very tall order, how to prevent making the place we live an unlivable place. The summit opened with a warning from the man who organized it.
We're either going to save the whole world or no part of it will be saved.
This is not going to be any ordinary summit meeting in Rio. The countries there have very different ideas about how to save the planet, and there's a very fundamental dispute which is unlikely to be resolved. Many of the so-called developing nations of the world believe that they are being asked to give up the benefits of a modern industrial nation, such as this one, in order not to further damage an environment which is already under tremendous strain because of what the industrial nations have done to it. Tonight and tomorrow, we're going to look at a classic case, India. Our American Agenda reporter is Ned Potter.
India's 850 million people struggle somewhere between the 20th century and the 12th. They use camels as often as trucks. They spend hours gathering twigs for cooking fuel. World leaders may be talking in Rio about global warming, but in this country's capital, daily survival pushes issues like that aside. Ask about the global environment, and the government blames the West.
We believe that the environmental degradation which has been caused has largely been caused by the developed countries.
On a global scale, that is true. The U.S., Europe, and other rich countries, with their cars, refineries, and electric plants, emit most of the carbon dioxide that threatens the climate. But the balance is quickly changing. Within 30 years, the developing countries will create more pollution than the industrial countries ever could. China will mine half the world's coal. India will have to build more and more power plants as its population grows over 1 billion. As these giant countries continue to modernize, they could triple their global warming emissions. The so-called third world could become a runaway first in producing greenhouse gases.
Many of us have been very aware of the fact that if we all followed the Western lifestyle, you can kiss this world goodbye.
This is a prime issue for the Earth Summit. How poor countries like India can develop without overwhelming us all. It will be especially difficult because as India's economy grows, millions of its people are demanding energy-guzzling consumer goods.
I wish to have a TV, of course, color TV and a car.
I want to buy a car, I want to buy a washing machine, I want to buy air conditioner.
So many of India's people want the same kinds of technology we have. And as all those bicycles turn to cars, that will mean more and more greenhouse gases. But despite the environmental consequences, many Indians argue they cannot be made to forego industrialization just because the West says so. For instance, look at rainforests, which India and other countries are cutting down to fund development, but which the Western countries want saved because they absorb global warming gases. At Rio, the West had hoped for a rainforest preservation treaty, but the Asians said no deal.
If you want us to stop cutting our forests and to conserve, then we have this great economic crisis on our hands.
It would be a crisis because developing nations see timber exports as a way out of poverty, to pay the trillion-dollar debt they owe to the wealthy industrial countries. Now they say those same countries, which they often call the North, are trying to make them sign environmental treaties that cut off their hope of wealth.
I don't think India should be signing anything. I don't think any developing country should be signing anything. It is the North which is trying to give us lectures, and I think that's not right.
In all their anger, the developing countries believe that, for once, they have some leverage. By sheer size, they can shape the future of the world's environment.
If the poor continue to destroy their forests because they have to live, destroy their waters and their soils because they have to survive, sooner or later that is going to show up in global processes like climate change.
Poor countries say the way out is for rich countries to provide them with non-polluting technologies. But that will take billions of dollars, sure to be argued hotly at the summit. For now, the industrial and developing worlds may be far apart, but each controls the other's future. Ned Potter, ABC News, New Delhi.
In other words, their problem is our problem. More tomorrow, and back in a moment.
How could this happen? They've taken the secret.
Europeans are upset. The Kellogg's Muesli cereal uses their secret recipe.
This we kept in the family.
After all, they've been guarding this delicious secret forever. Ah, but this luscious blend of sweet fruit, crunchy nuts, and crisp whole grains was destined to become Kellogg's Mueslix.
Angelina, you told?
It wasn't me. I swear.
Kellogg's Mueslix, the European secret for great taste.
At night, I soak my dentures. In the morning, I use toothpaste. At night, I soak.
Wake up. All you need is denture cream. In just 90 seconds, denture cream gets dentures nearly twice as clean. So why pay for two products? All you need is denture cream.
You make me feel so young.
Promise Extra Light Spread. Half the saturated fat and calories of margarine and a taste you'll enjoy with all your heart.
You make me feel so young.
Now Promise Extra Light in sticks. Get Heart Smart.
You probably think the best American car value is some little Econovox you have to settle for, right? Nope. It's a Buick. The luxurious Buick Park Avenue. That's according to the Complete Car Cost Guide. They calculated the 5-year cost of depreciation, financing, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and repairs, and found that Park Avenue is the best American car value. For a free reprint from the Complete Car Cost Guide, call 1-800-4-BUICK.
I'm Ted Koppel. Tonight on Nightline, an unprecedented challenge to the 3 presidential candidates. 6 angry senators demand a solution on the biggest issue, the deficit.
Finally from us this evening, the disappearing voters. If you have followed the primaries this season, you already know that once again, selecting the major party candidates has been left to a very small percentage of the electorate. In a country that prides itself on being such an active democracy, there's not much voter activity. ABC's Mort Dean tonight on why.
It was a typical primary year with people who voted
because I believe in participating in the political process.
Very much being outnumbered by people who did not.
I wasn't registered.
Nobody really had much to offer anyway.
Statistics from the primaries prove again that while we brag a lot about majority rule in this country, the majority often does not rule, because in the primaries, the majority often does not vote.
No, I have never voted in my entire life.
This year started out with a record primary turnout in New Hampshire, but even that record fell below a majority. By the time the primary season ended yesterday, less than 17% of the voting age population in the primary states had gone to the polls. Less than 17%, despite all of the complaining.
They'll vote with their tonsils for the next 4 years, but they won't come in here and vote with a pen when they should be here.
People who study voting trends say there are many reasons for the voter drought, including declining voter loyalty to the 2 major parties, weakened labor unions unable to get out the vote, widespread distaste for politicians and the way the media covers them, and lately, another reason given for not voting, waiting for Perot.
Because I want to vote for Ross Perot, and he ain't on a ballot. It's a waste of my time.
America's voting record in recent years is dismal and declining. Declining steadily not only in the primaries, but in general elections as well. In November 1988, only the barest majority, 50.2%, voted for President of the United States. Morton Dean, ABC News, New York.
And that's our report on World News tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Wednesday, from the outrageous
You're the one suing for alimony.
And you think that's easy?
Beats working for a living.
To the courageous.
You have no idea what he's capable of.
He did it repeatedly. Night after night. He made me swear never to tell. Oh, God, forgive me.
Civil Wars, Wednesday.
Tonight at 5 and 10, watch Channel 5 News for Murphy's Law, brought to you by Bonanza, where the extras don't cost extra.
I heard you guys got a great deal on the '93 Ford Escort.
Not a deal, a whole new way of buying. 4 Escorts, one price, $10,499.
Not so fast. I want power steering, rear defrost, and a good stereo.
Still one price.
All right, I want air conditioning. And what if I want a hatchback or a sedan?
$10,499.
Right now, you can get any one of 4 new '93 Escorts, all well-equipped for only $10,499. No gimmicks, no hidden costs. See your Ford dealer today.
How about a wagon?
$10,499.
Just checking.
Are you stuck in a job with no chance to advance? Call the National Education Center for a call.